Why do IEPs? Best Practices and Bloopers by Christine Zielinski through the University of Anchorage, Alaska, July 21st, 2014. The following information is to assist educators and parents in developing partnerships through empathy and understanding while following best practices for individual education plan or IEP development. It's been determined legally and historically that students that are differently abled have needed written supports and documentation to be included in the mainstream as much as possible. After the presentation, it's hoped that we rise to the occasion and remember political action and the intention of laws are to improve the human condition. This presentation does not cover the eligibility process. However, it's assumed that in cases represented, the student has been determined eligible for special education through procedural safeguards with services relating to at least one identified disability. Historically, children with disabilities have only succeeded with mandated supports. Laws and regulations have moved kids from being ignored to being a part of our world. An individual education plan, or IEP, safeguards this right. Along with IEP empowerment, the goal of this information is to encourage educators to stick with the procedural safeguards and special education process to become a proactive, positive change agent so that everyone will benefit from the strengths of a more inclusive community. There is a plethora of relevant case law that clarifies the intent of the inclusion law, such as the IDEA or Public Law 94-142 and so on. They aim to improve the human condition for equal educational opportunity by simply searching the web or court cases under special education, such as through rights law. The frontrunner to desegregation of schools stems from Brown versus Board of Education. This Brown decision is relevant to students with differing abilities. In Board of Ed of Hendrick Hudson School District versus Rowley, in 1982, the court clearly defined free and appropriate public education, or FAPE, with a two-pronged decision process that includes procedural safeguards and educational benefit. The schools, its state agencies, must follow procedural safeguards first to even go beyond and see the second prong of whether the school is providing educational benefit. Court law helped Amber and all students have access with health conditions that can be supported by related services such as nursing, as well as students with emotional behavioral difficulties being protected against being kicked out for being bad. More recent law mandates have focused on predetermination and having substantial data and parental participation. Though the intent of these court cases and rulings is assumed to help educational teams, including parents, find a working relationship for a student to have educational success, the real legal battle and messages can become sad and discouraging. Most IEPs are either at the beginning or the end of a long day and requires educators to make subplans or recapture the momentum of the lessons they were presenting previously. This is on top of many educators feeling forced to attend another meeting while silently moaning, "Make it stop, why can't we just teach?" It would be ideal to have a world where an IEP for every child was automatic, that we did not need to assess and test to know where students are and need to go. However, we know we need to be accountable, daily reaching internally to why we teach, what our beliefs and motivations are to be in the field, realizing that one is not alone, as well as hanging on to any student's successes, kudos, or thanks for jobs well done helps us keep going. We know that what we do is important, and deep down we know we have to document what needs to be done. There are many educators willing to share what works and educational support sites to help teachers meet students' needs that may be challenging. One such site is the Association of Supervision and Curriculum. The site has many ideas, such as Benito's story of a student experienced mental retardation using peer supports, alternate ways to share understanding through drawing, and structures in the general education setting for part of a school day. There are a plethora of IEP information sources such as the Office of Special Education Programs, or OSEP, through the United States Government of Education, and all the way to having each state have their own special education department and each district having special education departmental supports. All educators are encouraged to continue to ask questions, get training, and seek supports. However, the intent of this information is to get you started right now. First, any person should already know a first impression counts. The number one pitfall or blooper is to forget to use person-first language. It is advisable and avoidable to use disability in any means of casual conversation. Surely you see the error in introducing a friend to someone new by saying, "This is my autistic friend Bill." When discussing confidentiality with colleagues or parents on a shared case, use the same theory of confidentiality and care. Think of all the famous or at least amazing cases of people who have used their abilities to do everyday magic, all the way to major human philanthropy. You may have a student in your class right now that might be like Albert Einstein, who was slow in learning to speak, or Alexander Graham Bell, who had lackluster grades and struggled to read and write, or Helen Keller, who grew up and graduated in 1904 despite having immediate blindness, deafness, and mutism at birth, or Thomas Edison, who had a fever that left him hard of hearing and only learned to read by the age of 12, but then became a self-educated and independent learner. Or Marlee Matlin, who was taught within her community even though she was deaf. Robin Williams, who was diagnosed with ADHD and learned to get through by becoming active and wrestling in sports. Or Stephen Hawking, who himself was not an outstanding student. Or Temple Grandin, who at the age of 2 was diagnosed with autism. Her mother was blamed for her disability and sought to have help and keep her with peers. She is now very successful. Or even Tom Cruise. Like his mother and 3 sisters, he suffered from dyslexia, and at first he was not going to be in acting. It is amazing to see one commonality is a disability for these people. However, we see beyond that to the unique strengths each individual has. The other commonality is someone like you, a great teacher, perhaps like Annie Sullivan, who helped build on a student's strengths and differences to help them access education, to contribute and make a difference in society. Beyond social courtesy, where does the procedural safeguards for an IEP meeting start? After getting the bones of the meeting ready by compiling data and drafting an IEP, inviting the parent, and convening as a group, court cases have paid the importance of who is the IEP group or IEP team. The minimum requirements is the parent or parents, the regular education teacher, the special education teacher, and a district representative. So how many is minimum? The answer is 3, because it's tricky. The district representative, whom is the building administrator, can delegate the role to a special education team member. Team members are often larger for learners with more access challenges, and the district representative should not delegate that role for anticipated difficult meetings or meetings that went south and need to be rescheduled. Additionally, school teams are state agents and responsible for compliance with procedural safeguards in the identification through IEP implementation process, resulting in an educational benefit called free and appropriate public education, or FAPE. FAPE has been further defined through cases such as Rawling and Amanda. In these 2 cases and many others, the schools failed to prevail due to procedural safeguard mistakes. The court's not even looking at educational benefit if the first part was an error, which deals with paperwork and compliance issues. Raleigh's case did proceed to educational benefit, helping schools to define appropriate implementation. Another recent case is with Doug C. versus Hawaii Board of Education. This is where a parent rescheduled, often resulting in many delays. The courts ruled in favor of the parent's schedule when the parent asked for another date, even though the paperwork had lapsed. The court stated as long as documentation showed services are provided while rescheduling in Doug C., they should go forward and wait for the parent to do the IEP. However, in MP versus ASD, the court stated an IEP cannot lapse, and even if the parents were challenging, an annual IEP must be completed with the burden on the school district to be in compliance. Most parents will be cooperative and supportive. There are parents who have justified bad experiences, and unfortunately that is media fodder. Thus we see memes and even t-shirts and buttons moaning about the dissatisfaction with the IEP process. If the student's best interests are truly in your mind and you care, 99.9% of the time there are opportunities in building the relationships with parents and having successful IEP experiences. The IEP should go smoothly if the special education team, led by the case manager, is prepared by having data from all team providers and a draft of the IEP with goals and objectives. It is advised as best practice by OSEP, state handbooks, and district policy to send drafts home to the parents for review 3 to 5 days before the meeting. This gives parents time to analyze the information and more fully participate. The final blooper that can be avoided is the follow-through after the IEP meeting. Make sure all teachers have a working updated copy and parents are sent a clean copy at least 3 to 5 days after the meeting. To review, in Doug C. versus Hawaii, the Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit answered several critical questions pertaining to IEP meetings. The first, talking about the school holding an IEP meeting before the annual review deadline or after. If the meeting is not held, do the child services lapse? The court ruled that the services should never lapse until a new IEP is agreed on. If there are logistical scheduling conflicts for an IEP meeting, is it priority given to the school staff or the parents? And of course, the courts ruled for the parents. Another important issue is if the school could cure the failure by including a parent at an IEP meeting by convening a second IEP meeting with the parent within 30 days. It's great to have that meeting 30 days, but that would be your first. And you would document providing services until the parent was able to meet. This is if the parent wants to be there. However, parents could, in fact, say go ahead without me, and that is okay. These are when parent really wants to be there and it's challenging. If the school district violates the first prong of providing FAPE compliance with legal procedures, must the reviewing court still determine if the district violated the second prong of FAPE, whether the IEP is reasonably calculated to enable the child to receive educational benefits? Well, the court has ruled that if the first prong is not met, they won't even look into the educational benefit. So we need to really be sure that we have followed procedural safeguards. Understanding procedural safeguards is critical. However, duly important to IEP meetings is structure, participation, and courtesy. An agenda is recommended and often mandated for an IEP meeting. Once a meeting is scheduled, be prepared and on time. It is often a lament to those who attend meetings that they are too long. If you follow courtesy such as being on time, listening and refraining from sidebars, being prepared, staying engaged and positive, the experience for everyone will improve. If a draft has truly been provided to a parent prior to the meeting, parents will often not need to have a team member read verbatim from the IEP. They will become more likely to participate in the discussion. When challenges come up, don't be defensive. Use your agenda and procedures to help keep the team on track. Using parent-friendly language and making sure that they're clearly a member will also help any kind of challenges. As well as having substantial supportive data will alleviate misunderstandings and help build a working document that is a supportive and an appropriate IEP for a student. At the end of the meeting, best practice is making sure all IEP team members and educators working with the student have a current copy or summary of the revised IEP and know what to do with it. Conscientious educators have thought that a way to enhance a meeting, especially one that may be lending itself to be challenging, is to plan ahead and meet before the IEP. These meetings are often referred to as professional-only meetings, and they are approved in good practice for teams. Teams can begin organizing the data and drafting ideas, researching options, gathering team input, sharing student projects or other communications. However, the IEP teams must clearly avoid predetermination. Predetermination can happen if the team has already decided based on all their gatherings what they're going to do before a meeting even starts. When you begin an IEP, use the agenda and make sure it's clear that any future placement decision will happen at the end of the IEP once all data and information is fresh in the team's mind. A case example is Andrew versus La Colina Junior High. The principal was trying to help by future tracking a student from junior high to high school. Generally, this would be seen as best practice. However, Andrew had an IEP. The procedural safeguards state and court cases support that students with IEPs need to have a transition meeting with current IEP team stating needs, making the placement decision together, including the student where possible. If you feel overwhelmed, try not to be. Even if you don't know all of the procedures, but you're an advocate for a student to get the most appropriate education with access to as many typical peers and settings as possible, you will be on track. You are not alone. Even those who have made a lifetime profession in the field of special education are often faced with many questions about what IEP teams can and cannot do at meetings, such as recording or refusing, parent refusals, or figuring out what stay put means. When you're unsure, always go towards the source of information that can assist you with finding procedures and best practices. Special education law is often ever-changing and applies differently to students based on their needs. Based on implementation of laws made to ensure equal opportunity and access for students in the public school setting. If you begin to look for resources, you can start right at your school special education team and local school district. Here is an example of the Anchorage School District's public web-based handbook with district policy, written as guidance memos under state handbook guidance that is changed and updated as laws and implementation procedures are changed, removed, or added. The district level looks, as mentioned, up to their State Department of Education for guidance, and the State Department of Education also looks on towards the U.S. Department of Education and the Office of Special Education Programs. They all have live sites to help interpret and implement programs for students with special needs. As an educator, it is our ethical duty to create access opportunities and education for all our students. With budget cuts, class sizes, and curricular demands, the purpose for education can become blurred. Just like exercise, diet, or any positive practice, it takes time and due diligence. Are you up to the challenge? Yes, you are, because you can, and it's the right thing to do. So why do we do IEPs? Follow these best practices and avoid bloopers? Because inclusion starts at the IEP, and equal educational opportunity is a right for all. Thank you for your attention, and I will stop and pause for questions. Why do IEPs? Best Practices and Bloopers by Christine Zielinski through the University of Anchorage, Alaska, July 21st, 2014. The following information is to assist educators and parents in developing partnerships through empathy and understanding while following best practices for individual education plan or IEP development. It's been determined legally and historically that students that are different